911. What's your emergency?
Help! Somebody please help!
In the quiet town of Clearwater Springs, Florida, a backyard sanctuary transformed into a scene of primal horror. For 5 years, Julia Banks had raised an alligator named Reef from a vulnerable hatchling into a formidable predator. She believed her care and love had bridged the ancient divide between human and beast, that she had tamed nature itself. But on a sweltering August afternoon, that illusion crumbled, revealing a truth as old as time: nature is untamed and unforgiving. This wasn't a zoo or a wildlife preserve. This was her home. And in her own backyard pool, the beloved creature she called family would become her executioner. You're watching Animal Reckoning, where the most shocking animal encounters are brought to life. If this story grips you, be sure to subscribe, like, and share, because what you're about to witness is only the beginning. Julia Banks was just 28 when her life was tragically cut short. Clearwater Springs, known more for its citrus groves than animal drama, mourned one of its most beloved residents. Julia wasn't just an animal lover, she was a rescuer, a caretaker, and a quiet local hero. Injured egrets, orphan raccoons, abandoned possums, her home had been a revolving door of second chances for creatures in need. But among them all, none touched her heart like Reef. She discovered him in 2018 as a tiny 6-inch hatchling chirping on the muddy banks of the Appalachia. With soft striped belly scales and wide, blinking eyes, Reef looked more helpless than dangerous. While most would have turned away, Julia saw vulnerability. She scooped him up, wrapped him in a towel, and took him home. She named him Reef. Friends later recalled the almost magical bond between them. Julia would often joke that Reef had imprinted on her, like a duckling on its mother. Through her animal rehab center, she obtained a special wildlife permit to keep and care for him permanently. As Reef grew, so did Julia's attachment. By age 3, he was over 5 feet long. By 5, nearly 8 feet of pure muscle and instinct. Still, Julia was undeterred. Wildlife officers issued warnings, urging her to remember that apex predators like alligators never fully lose their primal instincts. But Julia believed Reef was different. She fed him by hand, swam with him in her backyard pool, and even let him sunbathe beside her as she read. Her social media was filled with images of Reef resting his massive head in her lap, or responding to her voice like a loyal dog. Some followers were captivated. Others were horrified. As one of her colleagues later reflected, she treated Reef like her child. Maybe that was the problem. The tragic irony is that Reef was no ordinary pet. He was a descendant of dinosaurs, engineered by evolution for stealth, strength, and survival. From that first moment Julia found him in the wild, chirping for a mother that would never return. She made a decision unlike any she'd made before. Instead of rehabilitating and releasing him, she applied to raise him indefinitely under her wildlife permit. Reef's early days were spent in a heated indoor enclosure with a custom-built pond. Julia hand-fed him ground turkey mixed with vitamins, tapping a spoon to signal feeding time. Every interaction strengthened her belief that Reef was different, that he knew her, trusted her. But as Reef grew, so too did the risks. At 3 feet long, he was moved to a larger outdoor enclosure. By 4 feet, Julia transitioned him to a converted in-ground backyard pool. She swam with him regularly, convinced this deepened their connection. His calm responses and stillness in the water were, in her eyes, signs of trust. But to seasoned wildlife professionals, they were red flags. The behaviors Julia saw as affection were simply Reef's instincts, patterns misunderstood as loyalty, when in fact, they were the quiet before the inevitable. Interpreted by wildlife experts as nothing more than habitual conditioning, Reef's calm behavior was misleading. Still, he never showed overt aggression. Julia could touch him, swim beside him, even stroke his powerful jaw, and Reef would simply close his eyes and remain perfectly still, as if soothed by her presence. He recognized her scent, responded to her voice. In 5 years, he had never snapped, hissed, or lashed out. It was easy, perhaps too easy, for Julia to fall into the dangerous belief that he saw her as family. But while Reef lived alongside her with what appeared to be affection, nature does not forget. By 2023, Reef had grown into a 300-pound apex predator. His tail alone could knock down a grown adult, and his feeding regimen had shifted from careful hand feedings to whole chickens and frozen rats tossed from a distance. Still, Julia swam with him, whispering reassurances, smiling, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed, she just couldn't see it. By the summer of 2022, Reef had reached a staggering 7.5 feet in length. His body rippled with dense muscle, and the once fragile eyes were now cold and calculating. Despite this, Julia clung to the delusion that he was still the helpless hatchling she had rescued. She continued to swim with him, feed him whole chickens, and speak to him like a friend. But concerns were growing. Neighbors, friends, even wildlife officials began voicing their unease. Kenneth Lyles, a seasoned field officer from the Florida Wildlife Commission, visited Julia's property after a routine inspection raised red flags. He'd heard whispers about the pet gator lady and her massive alligator. In his report, Lyles described Reef's imposing size, the inadequate enclosure, and most alarmingly, subtle shifts in behavior. What struck him most was Julia's unshakable defiance. When he told her plainly, "Instincts kick in. He's not a dog, Julia," she just smiled, as if she had heard it all before. To her, these were fears rooted in ignorance, not reality. She insisted she knew Reef better than anyone. But then the warnings started turning into signs. Neighbors reported hearing disturbing hissing noises during feedings. One man saw Reef slam his tail violently against the fence as Julia approached. A teenage girl walking her dog past the house claimed Reef lunged at the chain-link enclosure with his jaws wide open. Still, Julia wouldn't admit anything had changed. In one online video, she laughed while Reef rested quietly near the pool. "He's misunderstood," she said, her voice laced with defensiveness. "People just don't get him. He's not dangerous. He just needs trust." But the comments painted a different picture. Pleas to be careful. Warnings to stop swimming with him. Some called it a ticking time bomb. Julia never replied. The warnings had been loud and clear. And in just a few weeks, they would prove devastatingly accurate. On the scorching afternoon of August 18, 2023, the humidity clung to the air like a second skin. Julia walked into her backyard with a pool skimmer and a bucket, intending to clean the algae-clouded water just as she had done countless times before. Reef floated nearby in the shallow end, his massive body still, his eyes half closed. Normally, he remained calm during these moments, sometimes showing curiosity, often indifference. But that day, something was different. Reef's body was tense, his movements subtle but coiled with energy. Julia didn't notice. Confident from years of peaceful interactions, she stepped into the water. What she didn't realize was that Reef was agitated. He had just eaten a large meal less than an hour earlier, but instead of resting, his ancient hunting instincts were awake, stirring beneath his calm exterior. As Julia dipped the skimmer into the water, Reef made his move. His tail swept beneath her legs in a blur, and before she could react, his massive jaws clamped down on her right leg. It was instantaneous and brutal. Reef began what experts call a death roll, a violent, spinning attack designed to tear prey apart. Julia's screams pierced the air, desperate and raw, as the peaceful sanctuary she had built became a scene of chaos and primal violence. She fought to break free. Thrashing wildly, Julia fought with every ounce of strength she had left, but Reef's grip was unrelenting, a vice of pure bone and muscle. The peaceful afternoon shattered as panic erupted through the neighborhood. Neighbors heard the commotion and rushed to call 911. What began as another routine cleaning, just Julia and the creature she had raised from infancy, turned into a nightmare. At approximately 3:15 p.m., Clara Monroe, Julia's next-door neighbor, was tending to her garden when she heard the terrifying sound of splashing and blood-curdling screams. She dropped her tools and ran to the fence. What she saw would haunt her forever. Reef, the massive alligator Julia had once cradled in her arms, was now thrashing in the pool, jaws locked tightly on Julia's leg, dragging her deeper into the water. Clara watched in horror as Reef performed a death roll, the chilling behavior alligators use to incapacitate prey. The pool water churned violently, clouded with sediment and streaks of red as Reef twisted Julia's body beneath the surface. Her screams echoed across the neighborhood, raw, desperate, and utterly helpless. "Help, please!" she cried, her voice nearly drowned by the chaos in the water. Clara, hands trembling, dialed 911 with shaky fingers. "There's blood in the pool," she sobbed. "She's not moving. Please hurry. She's being attacked by an alligator." Reef, his powerful jaws still locked on Julia, dragged her relentlessly toward the deep end. The water darkened further as the attack continued, and Julia's movements slowed. The fight in her was fading. Neighbors gathered, frozen in disbelief, watching through fences and windows, powerless to stop what was unfolding. The wail of emergency sirens cut through the humid air, but the damage had already been done. Julia Banks' life was slipping away in the murky water of her own backyard pool. Within 8 minutes of Clara's desperate call, the first emergency vehicle arrived. Paramedics and officers from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission rushed into the yard. The scene was chaos. Horrified neighbors looked on as wildlife officers wielded long poles, desperately trying to keep Reef away from Julia's motionless body. Reef thrashed and slammed his tail against the pool edge in defiance. Paramedics waded into the bloodied water, pulling Julia from the pool with grim determination. Her body was pale, limp, and covered in deep, grotesque wounds. Her right leg was mangled, unmistakably marked by the crushing power of an alligator's bite. She was also showing clear signs of drowning, waterlogged lungs and shallow, labored breaths. Despite the rapid response, Julia remained unconscious. She was rushed to the hospital, where trauma surgeons fought desperately to save her life. But the injuries were catastrophic. Hours later, in a quiet hospital room filled with blinking monitors and whispered prayers, Julia Banks was pronounced dead. The tragedy sent shockwaves through Clearwater Springs. But the ordeal wasn't over. With Julia gone, Reef was subdued using tranquilizer darts. According to Florida state protocols for captive alligators involved in human fatalities, he was deemed too dangerous to be relocated. The once beloved pet was euthanized shortly after capture, a heartbreaking end to a bond that had turned fatally wrong. News of Julia Banks's death spread quickly, not just through Clearwater Springs but across the state and beyond. The town was shaken. Friends, neighbors, and animal lovers struggled to reconcile how someone so devoted to wildlife could suffer such a fate. Candlelight vigils were held in her memory. Mourners gathered in the local park, holding photographs of Julia, always smiling, often with Reef when he was still small and innocent, before nature reclaimed what was never truly tamed. Tears flowed freely at Julia Banks' memorial as friends, family, and fellow rescuers shared stories of her boundless kindness, unwavering passion, and deep commitment to the creatures others often feared. Among the mourners were her former colleagues from the Regional Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, their voices trembling with emotion, not just from grief, but from an ache of regret. "She loved him, yes," said Sarah Middleton, a fellow rescuer, her voice breaking. "But somewhere along the way, she forgot what he really was, a wild animal. No matter how close you think you are, the instincts don't just disappear." That sobering truth echoed throughout the community, sparking a fierce and necessary conversation about the risks and responsibilities that come with keeping exotic animals. The deaths of Julia and Reef reignited a heated debate over Florida's exotic animal laws. Animal rights activists and wildlife officials alike began demanding stricter regulations, warning of the inherent dangers in keeping apex predators in residential settings. National news panels hosted experts who spoke bluntly. "Domestication is a myth," declared Dr. Marcus Lanning, a leading herpetologist. "You can't train nature out of an alligator's DNA." He explained that while such animals can appear tame, they are biologically programmed for survival. And when adulthood arrives, so too does a reemergence of their natural behaviors, often with devastating consequences. Julia's death forced many to confront uncomfortable truths about human-wildlife relationships, especially those involving powerful predators like alligators. Her story became a chilling lesson, a cautionary tale of love, trust, and the merciless instincts of nature. Animal behaviorist Dr. Leah Torres, who has spent more than 2 decades studying reptilian psychology, offered insight into what likely unfolded in Julia's final moments. Alligators are territorial by nature, she explained. When Reef reached over 7 feet and several hundred pounds, his need to defend space intensified. No matter how familiar Julia was, she may have been seen as a threat. Dr. Torres emphasized the timing of the attack. Reef had recently been fed, something that actually increases aggression in alligators. It's a dangerous window, she said. The animal isn't hungry, but its territorial instincts spike, making it far more irritable. Warning signs like Reef's tail slapping, hissing, and lunging were subtle but critical. And yet, as Dr. Torres warned, humans often misinterpret such cues, especially when emotion clouds judgment. We project emotions onto wild animals. We see love or calmness where there is only instinct, she said. But wild predators don't operate on affection. They operate on survival. Her conclusion was chilling and direct. This tragedy underscores the paramount importance of respecting wildlife for what it truly is: powerful, unpredictable, and inherently wild. Emotional bonds cannot override biology. Julia Banks dedicated her life to saving animals. But in trying to tame one, she lost everything. Her memorial, surrounded by candles and photos capturing moments of joy and tenderness, now stands as a solemn reminder of the fragile, and often deadly, line between human affection and untamed wildness. If Julia's story moved you, if it stirred something deep inside, share this video. Help spread awareness about the hidden dangers of exotic pet ownership. Subscribe to our channel for more raw, emotional stories from the wild, stories that must be heard, remembered, and learned from. And never forget this truth: wild animals are not toys. They are not pets. Until society fully accepts that, tragedies like this will continue. The bloodstained patio where Julia once celebrated her online success now stands as a silent monument to a mistake that cost her life. The framed photo of her smiling beside Reef, once a symbol of hope, is now a haunting image of what was lost. The gate marked "No exotic pets allowed" remains locked, but the lesson behind it is still wide open. Wild animals are not pets. And they never will be.